Hey, it's Guido coming at you with a tactics talk. Let's talk gold ammo. Let's talk premium ammo. I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to go over some basic loadout and tactics. We'll talk about game balance, and we'll talk about potential fix. And at the end, we'll go over a love note that I got at the end of this match, talking about gold ammo, and that will cover some of the issues as well. So let's get started here. I've loaded into Siegfried line. We are in an encounter, a defense. So we're defending, and I'm heading up here into the north, up onto the A line, and fighting about A6, A7 area. If you look at the team, they're kind of spreading out up here onto the North Hill, and some guys down in the city. Not much going on right here. So we'll stop here and we'll start with the gold discussion. You'll notice that my loadout is 6 heat, 33 AP, and 6 HE. See that in the bottom of the screen. What do I usually carry gold-wise? For the tactical discussion, I carry somewhere between 4 to 6, sometimes up to 8 gold rounds, whether it's heat or APCR, in nearly every tank I have. There are some few tanks where I carry almost a full gold loadout. If I am doing a tournament or something organized, obviously I will switch that out and carry almost all gold. We'll talk about the differences between heat and APCR to some extent. So some of that will depend on the type of tank. But as a general rule, you'll find me carrying 6 to 8, sometimes down to 4 depending on the tank. Why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number one, profit. For me, it becomes a calculus of how many gold you can fire and still make a little bit of profit. In my premium tanks, I like to make a little cash as I go. Why? Because I like to carry about 20 to 30 million credits in silver at any one time. When a new line comes out, that gives me enough to kind of blaze through that line, buy tanks as I want, use my free experience to fully upgrade tanks and play them. So that is about why I carry, or I want to have, 20 to 30 million credits. So that means I'm usually trying to make a profit. In addition, I wanted to buy all the tier 10s at one point, and that required a lot of silver. I currently have all the tier 10s, so that's not as big of a factor. So that is some of the profit discussion for gold. I find that at my skill level, in my premium tanks at about tier 8, I can fire between 4 to 8 gold rounds. And if I have a 2,000-ish damage round, I'm going to make money. If I fire them all and I'm somewhere around 1,000, it's about a wash to a slight loss. But somewhere around the 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, I'm starting to make pretty good cash. So there's the math, more or less, without doing it for every tank out there at a tier 8 premium tank level, which is making more credits. In addition to that, realize I'm running premium account. All right, so premium account, premium tank, somewhere between 4 to 8 premium rounds can be fired. If I do a decent game, not a great game, I'm going to make money. And that's where I've pretty much landed as far as that goes. Now let's talk effectiveness. There's a couple things to think about there. Obviously, gold rounds are going to have a higher pen, whether it's heat or APCR. So there are situations where you're going to want to fire the gold round. Specifically, as one example, you're looking at a premium tank here with 175 pen, a notoriously low pen for a premium tank, but it also carries preferential matchmaking. So that's the trade-off right there. Okay. However, you load up the heat shell, you're getting plenty of pen for its tier, and enough pen to do something at least at tier 9. So there's the effectiveness argument. Realize this thing is running heat, not APCR, and heat has its own issues. There's another kind of gold, HE gold. Typically that's going to give you more damage and a larger splash, especially with the artillery. And there's a trade-off for heat. Heat has a lot of pen, but it's going to have problems with angled surfaces. It's going to have problems with tracks, getting through tracks. It's also going to have a problem with spaced armor. APCR does not have as much of a downside. It's typically got less pen than heat does, but it doesn't have as much of a downside for those other reasons. You can get into the normalization and the speed and everything else, and we're not going to deep dive into that. But there's not a real big trade-off with the APCR. In general, it's considered superior. So that's kind of the loadout discussion for why I do what I do. And then the question becomes, hey, when do you use it? I've had this question quite a bit, and we'll get going with this battle. Do you use it first, when the shots count the most, early damage, as far as I'm concerned? Do you use it as required, you just switch when you want it? Or do you use it last, meaning that once I get down to the nitty-gritty, I need to make my shots count, do I use it last? I'm going to come up on this one and shoot AP. Unfortunately, I go right into his mantlet, so no pen. Potentially with the heat, I'd have gone through it, although it's highly angled, so I may have just got a crappy bounce as well. You'll notice that I've just gone to heat. Okay? Why? I'm the only guy over here, and I want to make my shots count. Now, shooting into the side and hitting tracks is probably a good way to make your heat non-effective, but I got lucky and hit him not in the tracks. Now, I've got lots of customers over here, and it's just me. And as I'm looking at the battle, I can tell that they're already up in our face in the middle of town. Bunch of guys camping on the hill back there, being relatively useless, and me. Good news is there's only an M44, and I'll pop this guy in the side. Danger there with heat is the E25 is highly angled, all kinds of weird little angles, big tracks on the side, big in relative to its size, so probably easy to bounce heat. But I'm going to come over here, I'm going to give this guy another one, and this will become important later because we will find out that he does not appreciate being shot by heat. So I fired 3 of my 6, and I keep going. So one of my issues that I continuously run into, I missed that guy, is that I will switch to the gold and then just keep firing till it's gone. So I'm busy fighting the battle. Okay, so a better player would think about this a little more and look at what's going on here and say, well, maybe I don't need the heat. But I've also got a hold down T29, and I'm just trying to make everything count right now. So the calculus is I feel like I need to make my shots count. I got more pen with the heat. That's what I'm running with. So I've gone with the use it first. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to try to jump on this Cromwell and knock him out. Reload, take him out. Now I've got to fight the T29. Now the T29 is running the small gun, so he's still got the gun from the tank before, and that's going to be much to my advantage. In addition to that, he's shooting HE, so he's not really doing much to me. I'm going to ram the E25 and take him out, and we will find that he and I have a little discussion afterwards, what I like to call a love note, and that's somebody chasing you back into the garage. Now I'm out of heat, right? So I'm going to just AP, taking quite a few shots. I'll end up taking 13 shots in this battle. 6 of them will be the heat. Going with the idea that because of being very outnumbered on the corner and I needed to make the shots count now, that's what I'm going with. You can see that things are going south here. We got it. The VTU is droning around out in the field. The guys on the hill are even getting pushed and killed, and I've got a hold down T29 here who is tearing me up. Alright, so let's go on to game balance then. We have the discussion, the tactical idea of the loadout, when you might want to use it. I didn't really get into too much detail about when you might want to use it. I tend to go with use it first. Sometimes if I'm on top of my game, it will be the as required, which is probably the best way to do it, meaning that you only load it when you need it. I will say one thing about that, the as required piece, if you're halfway loaded through with an AP and you decide you want your gold and you reload it, you press C and force a reload. I just sometimes feel like you lose some reload time in there when I'm kind of going back and forth on the as required thing. However, if you can time it out and do it right, it's probably the best way to do it. And the last one is when it's critical to win. Basically, what people will do there is just fire their normal round until it's the end of the game and they think they really need that critical shot. So those are the 3 ways. You know, usually it's not exactly one of those 3 ways. It's kind of a combo, but that's the general idea. So let's talk about game balance in here, because that's kind of the controversy about gold. And I will say that my opinion of it is one of Wargaming's biggest problems with balance right now is that they have wildly different pen values. All right, and what that means is the regular round has pen value X, and the gold round for the same tank has pen value Y, which is much higher for the gold round. What that does is complicates exponentially Wargaming's efforts to balance pen versus armor. So all the arguments of my armor's no good because of gold are absolutely valid. Because a tank with a certain regular AP round is an entirely different tank when it fires its gold round in general. One interesting example of that not being true are the Japanese tanks. If you've noticed, their regular AP rounds, their gold AP rounds don't have that much of a pen boost, and that's kind of an interesting. I thought maybe that's the way that Wargaming was going, and that may have been actually a test of that kind of idea where you reduce the pen of gold. If it was a test, I haven't heard anything, and I'm not really sure where it's going right now, but that's an interesting aside for the new Japanese tanks. So going back to the wildly different pen values, as I said, it's hard enough to balance 10 tiers, over 300 tanks, 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 different types of ammo, and then a gold version of most of those types of ammo. So just think about that for a minute. You're trying to balance a 3-tier system where you've got a tier 6, 7, and 8 fighting each other. All right. You have multiple types of ammo, just regular ammo for all those 3 different tanks, and then you multiply that by 2, not necessarily by 2, but you add extra pen values with gold rounds. It's no wonder that they're having a devil of a time balancing armor to pen values. And it is simply because they have this gold round in their game. Okay, so it makes armor a crapshoot at times. It's hard to know, especially in the past before the MALS was buffed, and we'll talk about that later, how that's been affected by this whole thing. But it's hard enough to know if your MALS is going to be able to bounce anything, let alone thinking the guy's going to press 2, and the entire armor layout and way you play that tank is different, and you can't know until you take the round. Okay, so I'm not saying everyone should know exactly everything, and I'm not saying it should be a very clear-cut mathematical formula of whether I bounce and whether I don't, and I should always know that beforehand. That's not the point. The point is it just becomes very frustrating and it feels random. Okay, it feels random, and a lot of people don't like that. So keep on going here. What to do? Lots of problems you came up with, Guido. Yeah, we know all those. What's the fix? Well, the fix, I think, first is to remove gold, and I'm sure people are losing their minds right now. But bear with me, because take a little shot on that guy. When I say remove gold, that is going to allow them to work on their armor and pen balance issues. Now that they have taken out that extra variable right there, I am enjoying the M44 shooting heat at me all game. Now that they've taken out that extra variable, they can go ahead and balance. I'll get killed here. They can go ahead and balance their armor to pen values off of their standard rounds. Okay? So this needs to be advertised correctly. They'll just say, look, we're going to remove gold for 6 months or whatever it is. We're going to get the data. We're going to start working on armor and pen values. We're going to try to get our balance sorted out a bit, and then we will reconsider gold. You could do this on a test server. That's possible. You could do this on the sandbox server. Some of this is happening, but I don't think it's in a broader context yet of, no kidding, let's get a handle on this gold issue, gold ammo issue. All right. So once they remove it, then they work on the armor and pen balance, and now you've got to start thinking about, how do we put it back in if we're going to use it? Is it something that we do actually need once we work on the armor and pen balance, and we look at it and say, all right, we now still need something for tanks to deal with some of these super heavies or heavily armored tanks. So we need to throw people a bone. I do understand the economics of it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Why the company would want to do gold, what the incentive is for them to run or to let players run gold ammo. I understand all that, but taking out advertising to their customers why they're doing it, and then coming back and saying, all right, let's take a look at it, and we are going to add gold rounds back in, but they're going to have a reduced pen value, or they're going to have reduced damage, or there's going to be some trade-off for the advantage. Not to make the advantage useless, but to make the advantage slightly less than it is now. And that's the problem, because it is such a huge advantage. So reducing pen, like I said, maybe reducing damage, maybe a little bit of both for a gold round, but definitely the pen is too high for the gold rounds. As an example, at least heat has trade-offs, right? As I talked about earlier, dealing with the tracks, dealing with highly angled armor, dealing with spaced armor, those are all drawbacks of heat. And that's good. So it gets a lot of pen and it has drawbacks. APCR gets a lot of pen, not as much as heat, but has very few drawbacks. And both of them are probably running with way too high of pen overall as far as the game goes in the meta. All right, that brings me to the last subject here. I got a love note after this battle, and here it is. You can read it there as you go. Guy comes in, this is the E25. So I wonder how much your stats is due to spinning, blah, blah, blah. And I wrote back, well, I'd say a bit, obviously. I hope you don't mind if I ask you how much of yours is from not doing the same. So a little pithy on the response, I admit, right there. But the point of that is, look, this is in the game right now. I talked about why I carry it, and I think it's important that you do carry it right now. That's the meta of the game. You need to have some gold rounds so you can deal with these kinds of situations that we've talked about. And you can read the rest of it. I told him I carry 6 heat. You got some because I was outnumbered, and I just pressed 2, and off I went. So he ended up eating 3 of my first 6 shots, or 2 at least of my first 6 shots, and I rammed him after that. So I told him I recommend 4 to 6 for most tanks. And he comes back and says, I don't believe you. Good enough. There's the video evidence that I just showed. And he says, take a month and spend nothing but premium. So he thinks that if he just loads premium, all of a sudden his skill is going to go up. I would admit that probably he's going to end up with a little bit more win 8. It's possible that if he uses it poorly, runs a bunch of heat tanks and doesn't understand when to use it or what not to shoot at with heat, yeah, I suppose it's possible that it would go down. But because people play so many different tanks, and if he just loaded pure gold, his win 8 might go up. But he's going to end up spending a lot more silver credits, isn't he? So I said, like I just mentioned, clearly most people carry some. I happen to think they should get rid of it. That's going into the discussion we just talked about. So I tell him, look, I think it really should go away. I tell him how many shots I took. He doesn't believe me anymore. Says, you say. I saw yet another high-ranked player shooting nothing but skill rounds. So you can see his attitude. They're skill rounds. You don't have any skill if you use them, blah, blah, blah. He tells me not a single tank on that corner had whole armor at all. Good point. The T29 had some. I discussed that as well. I say, look, the T29 can bounce my 175 depending on what he does. And all that is really moot. None of that matters too much. The point is that I carry 6, and I get in a situation like that, I'm probably going to start shooting it. And once it's gone, then I'm back to my AP. But it goes back to the attitude of gold rounds and how players look at them, right? So how players look at them. And if you are of the mind that it's a skill boost, I'm going to have to admit it's probably going to help a little bit on the win 8, but it's not a direct skill boost. You still got to know what you're doing, get yourself in the right position to get the shots, and then sometimes the gold is going to help you. I will also say that for the rest of this long discussion, absolutely, it is an issue in World of Tanks. For my money, I think you should take it out, at least initially. You could probably do it on the test server or sandbox server as far as changing it, but in any event, it definitely needs to be looked at and adjusted. Absolutely. All right. Hope you guys like this discussion. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section. If you like what you see, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, we will see it.